And one of the mission essential tasks of fatherhood is that of reminding our children by our words and by our example who God is and who we are because of who God is. And today, for Father's Day, I would like for us to consider the Apostle Paul, who, though he had no biological children, was the father of many spiritual children. All over the Roman Empire, the Apostle Paul fathered spiritual children through the gospel of Jesus Christ. And today, we're going to hear wisdom from a gospel father to his spiritual children. A gospel father helps his child remember. There it is. Now, I say gospel father because that term includes spiritual fathers in the family of God. Some of us are without fathers. Some of us are not biological fathers. Some of us have had dishonorable fathers. But thanks be to God through Jesus Christ, He has created a family of spiritual fathers. We are not without parents in the family of God. And so today I want us to consider Paul's fatherly words of remembrance. And so here's what we're going to remember, Paul says. Remember who you are, remember where you are, and remember what you must do. This is where we're going this morning. First, remember who you are. That's in chapter 4. We can look there. Remember who you are. How important that is. Because we get identity amnesia so quickly, don't we? And it's because the culture wants us to be what it tells us to be. Corinth was obsessed with recognition and perception and the approval of a target audience. Well, Paul came to Corinth to proclaim the true target audience. Paul proclaimed that the God of heaven and earth has sent His Son to rescue us from this Corinthian world. He called you, Paul said. He elected you. He enriched you. He sustains you. And through this gospel, Paul says, you are my child. And then with that, Paul says the most amazing thing in verse 16. He says, I urge you then, be imitators of me. Paul doesn't say, do as I say. Rather, do as I do. Without any arrogance, but rather with complete unself-consciousness, Paul reminds his spiritual children to copy his way of life. Remember who you are, Paul says. And then I want you to remember where you are. So Paul's word of identity becomes a word of locality. And that takes us to chapter 16, verses 13. Paul kind of talks like a commanding officer at war. Because these are military commands. These are military verbs. Be watchful. Stand firm in the faith. Act like men. Be strong. As far as Paul's concerned, spiritual warfare is no metaphor. It's real. Spiritual warfare is not for the faint of heart. And that's why Paul reminds the church that soldiers need to stand firm. And Paul reminds the Corinthians that there's a cause for which to fight, comrades to defend, and an enemy to defeat. And furthermore, these warnings are in the imperative. You see that? So they're not optional. Paul gives fatherly commands, not suggestions. Oh, and one more thing. Look, these are plural verbs. They're all in the plural. Paul is saying, y'all. Paul says you're not meant to do these alone. You're meant to live in community with other brothers and sisters in Christ. And that requires us to see this not as an institution, but as a family. And then remember what to do. That's verse 14. let all you do be done in love. So for all the complicated chaos that's going on in the Corinthian church, Paul's solution comes down to the grace of Christ and the selflessness of love. That's true for us too. Our difficulties with each other may feel complex and layered, and often that's the way it is. But the solution is as simple as cross-bearing love. It's easy to say, hard to do, because it requires the death of self. And not just the death of self, but the crucifixion of self.